Good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates. The topic that we are going to tackle this morning are all about hazardous and nuclear materials, which is the last chapter, the chapter 12. Introduction. Hazardous waste are poisonous byproducts of manufacturing, farming, city septic systems, constructions, automotive garage, laboratories, hospitals, and other industries. The waste may be liquid, solid, or sludge and contain chemicals, heavy metals, radiation, dangerous pathogens, or other toxins. Even households generate hazardous waste from items such as batteries, used computer equipment, and leftover paints or pesticides. So, as you can see, na symbol kini it represents the hazard symbols or warning symbols that are recognizable symbols designed to warn about hazardous or dangerous materials, locations, or objects, including electric currents, poisons, and radioactivity. So there are many types of hazardous waste that pose varying degrees of danger to public safety and environmental health. First, nuclear waste. Waste generated from nuclear power plants and nuclear weapon technology is arguably the most dangerous created by society. As you can see the picture, so nuclear waste is usually called radioactive waste material. For example, from the use or processing of nuclear fuel. So second, industrial waste. Many cleaners and solvents used in industrial and commercial processes become hazardous waste after their use. The Environmental Protection Agency or the EPA has specific or non-specific industries or processes as well as the degree of danger they pose. So, industrial waste. This is the waste produced by industrial activity, which includes any material that is rendered useless during a manufacturing process, such as that of factories, mills, and mining operations. So third, universal waste. Another category of hazardous waste is designated as universal waste. This waste is generated from a large variety of sources and consists of products that serve both commercial and personal use. So third, universal waste. These waste are hazardous waste that are widely produced by households and many different types of businesses. So next is medical waste. Medical waste of certain types can be a biohazard and pose safety risk. Through the US EPA does not strictly designate medical waste as hazardous, it definitely can cause health problems if it not properly managed. So medical waste is healthcare waste that may be contaminated by blood, body fluids, or other potentially infectious materials. Next is construction waste. Waste from construction sites can be hazardous. Asbestos tiles and insulation, lead pipes, and certain chemicals used in maintenance all fall into this category. The construction industry needs to be aware of those hazards and vigilant in their safe disposal. EPA guidelines again regulate and educate the industry on the disposal of their waste. So construction waste, so this waste is any kind of debris from the construction process. Electronic waste. Many electronic products contain trace amounts of hazardous materials that can pose problems if incinerated or disposed at landfill. So electronic waste, e-waste or electronic waste is a popular informal name of electronic products nearing the end of their useful life. Computer, television, VCRs, stereos, copiers, and fax machines are common electronic products. Many of these products can be reused, refurbished, or recycled.
Hazardous waste disposal sites. Hazardous waste facilitator and dispose of toxic materials. Hazardous waste material must be transported, contained, treated, or disposed of with extreme care and according to specific guidelines and procedures. Hazardous waste sites vary according to the types of hazardous material, but they can process and should be operating under resource. So, hazardous waste can be treated by chemical, thermal, biological, and physical methods. Chemical methods include ion exchange, precipitation, oxidation and reduction, and neutralization. Among thermal methods is high temperature incineration, which not only can detoxify certain organic waste but also can destroy them. Radioactive contamination is typically the result of a spill of accident during the production or use of radionuclides. These have unstable nuclei which are subject to radioactive decay. So, the radioactive contamination occurs when radioactive materials is deposited on or in an object or a person. Radioactive materials released into the environment can cause air, water, surfaces, soil, plants, buildings, people, or animals to become contaminated. Contamination does not include residual radioactive material remaining at a site after the completion of decommissioning. Therefore, radioactive materials is sealed and designed containers is not properly referred to as contamination, although the units of measurement might be the same. Containment. Containment. Being within the intended containment differentiates radioactive material from radioactive contamination. When radioactive materials are concentrated to a detectable level outside a planned containment, the area affected is generally referred to as contaminated. So, the action of keeping something harmful under control or within limits. The containment of the epidemic. Next, there are a large number of techniques of containing radioactive materials so that does not spread beyond the containment and become contamination. In the case of liquids, this is by the use of high integrity tanks or containers, usually with a sump system so that leakage can be detected by radiometric or conventional instrumentation. Contamination accumulation. Radioactive contamination may exist on surfaces or in volumes of material or air. So, some of the most common examples of chemicals contamination include cleaning products and disinfectants, and wash-proof and vegetables, chemicals from the use of non-safe plastics. Last is surface contamination. Surface contamination is usually expressed in units of radioactivity per unit of Surface contamination. Surface contamination is usually expressed in units of radioactivity per unit of area. This is becquerels per square meter. Other units such as picories per 100 centimeter or distinctions per minute per square centimeter may be used. Surface contamination may either fix or removable. In this case of fixed contamination, the radioactive material cannot by definition be spread but is still measurable. So, surface contaminants are the impurities that bond of the settle on metal surfaces and affect the physical and sometimes chemical properties of the metal, as well as the coatings. Surface contaminants may be as a result of a manufacturing process, the environment, or part handling.
So hello everyone, let's discuss about land disposal. The most common form of disposing of hazardous waste occurs at land disposal sites such as landfills, waste piles, land treatment units, or surface impoundments. The primary goal with land disposal is to permanently contain the waste and prevent the release of harmful pollutants to the environment. According to the EPA, most municipalities have land disposal sites in the forms of landfills or otherwise that are capable of disposing of varying types of hazardous waste. So, ang land disposal can be either in or on the ground. So, ang purpose of land disposal is to make hazardous waste less harmful to groundwater by reducing the potential for leaching of hazardous constituents and by reducing waste toxicity by destroying or removing harmful constituents. So, let's proceed to storage. What is storage, guys? Storage of hazardous waste refers only to the holding of waste for a temporary period of time before it is treated, disposed, or stored elsewhere, says the EPA storage fact sheet. After nimo ma-segregate ang mga basura, you will put it in the storage like containers or tanks. Trash can, pwede na siya before nimo siya i-disposed, depending on the type of hazardous waste that you will be storing or transporting prior to placing it in RCRA compliant facility. What is RCRA, guys? So, ang RCRA or Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, ang RCRA is the principal federal law in the United States governing the disposal of solid waste and hazardous waste. Waste storage must adhere to hazardous waste regulations. The waste must be placed in containers, tank drip pads, containment buildings, or waste piles that sufficiently contain it without leaks of any variety. Kasagaran sa ato is ingani, di ba, ang mga container, right? It is the common storage, but mas better if ingani. Asam to? Ingani. Naa siya'y segregation daan, pero para ready to dispose na dayon siya sa mga sa RCRA facility na giingon gaina. So, underground injection wells. Underground injection wells are used primarily for the disposal of liquid hazardous materials. Underground injection wells are also regulated according to the Safe Drinking Water Act due to their potential impact on drinking water resources. Underground injection wells is ingane, for example, how water is pumped up with oil and returned to the ground. Na oil wells na injection well. So, injection well is produced water with oil removed is returned to the geologic zone from which it originated. Once the oil has been removed, water is returned to the geographic formation it came from. The water is cleaner but is still not drinkable. Ingana na siya. So next is the types of disposal facilities. Hazardous waste facilities are organized by the types of hazardous materials they are able to process. So these facilities are often referred to as treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. Ang disposal facility is any site where hazardous waste is intentionally placed and at which the waste will remain after closure. Some facilities handle the recycling and disposal of batteries, others specialized in plastics, fluorescent lighting, infectious waste, metals, solvents, or substances such as oil and antifreeze. Some facilities are government-run while others are private commercial facilities. So now, how to find disposal sites? Most states' government websites in conjunction with the Department of Toxic Substances Control or equivalent department will provide lists of disposal sites according to the materials they are capable of processing. Actually, guys, you can use the RCRA InfoWeb to search identification and location data for specific hazardous waste handlers. Anyways, while many municipalities offer some form of hazardous waste disposal, depending on the type of waste, you may have to look to neighboring countries to find a facility appropriate to your hazardous waste disposal needs. So yes, you can search naman no sa mga website like this. Just search RCRA InfoWeb, then or you can click this link. Then mapadulong din mo sa kana siya ang mugawas. Then i-type ra ninyo ang inyong site ID, site name, street, city. Then you can find disposal sites. Then next is the radioactive waste. Radioactive waste are waste that contain radioactive material. Radioactive na siya. Radioactive waste are usually byproducts of nuclear power generation and other applications of nuclear fission or nuclear technology such as research and medicine. Ang radioactive, guys, is waste na siya from sa kana bitong mga nuclear, mga rare earth mining and nuclear weapons reprocessing. Radioactive waste is hazardous to most forms of life and environment and is regulated by government agencies in order to protect human health and the environment. So naka-familiar ba ang all ani nga sign? So if makakita mo ingana to, it is a warning sign of radioactive waste. Most of this is kanang near to nuclear power bitaw, like ingani. Mura siya container, diba, na butanganan og mga waste that contains radioactive materials. Manang ingana ka safety ang iyang murag container is because hazardous waste ang sulod ana og makadaot gina siya sa tao, sa environment especially. Last is the radioactive contamination. Also called radiological contamination, is the deposition of or presence of radioactive substances on surfaces or within solids, liquids, or gases, including the human body, where their presence is unintended or undesirable. Example aning radioactive contamination bitaw is kanang dira gani sa Richmond or Framac, nakakuan mo nga, di ba? Kanang ilang mga nuclear, mag-release na siya og aso. Kana siya na aso is hugaw mo na siya ang color niya is black or brown, medyo brown ingana. Mag-release na siya og mga hugaw na gikan sa kanang kumpanya. Ingani. Diba? kabantay mo kasagaran na nga na jud. Ano na siya? Radioactive materials released into the environment can cause air, water, surfaces, soil, plants, buildings, people, or animals to become what? Tungod sa kahugaw niya, ang effect niya sa mga tao or sa mga hayop is to become contaminated.
Airborne contamination. The air can be contaminated with radioactive isotopes in particulate form, which poses a particular inhalation hazard. Respirators with suitable air filters can mitigate this danger. Airborne contamination is measured by specialist radiometric instruments that continuously sample the air and filter and accumulate the airborne radioactive particles so that they can be measured by an ionizing radiation detector. Commonly, a semiconductor radiation detection sensor is used that can also provide spectrographic information on the contamination being collected. A further refinement is to have a moving filter device, which automatically moves the filter on incrementally to present clean areas of filter for accumulation and thereby allow a plot of airborne concentration over time. So, airborne contamination is na possible na mahawa ang clean air because of radioactive isotope na sa particulate form nagdudulot ng panganib sa atong paghinga. Ang airborne contamination is isusukat ang dalubhasang radiometric na instrument na nag-continue na magsasample ng hangin. So in the other words, siya ang magsasala at mag-iipon ng airborne radioactive particles upang sila ang masusukat ng isang ionizing radiation detector. First of the personal protective equipment is they protect your eyes, nose, mouth, and especially the respiratory system to able to did not adapt the dust, gases, or a fiber. Example, mga scientists, if maghimo silang experiment, they use a shield or PPA like mask, gloves o uban pa para dili nila malanghap or ma-adapt ang mga radioactive particles. Internal human contamination. Radioactive contamination can enter the body through ingestion, inhalation, absorption, or injection. For this reason, it is important to use personal protection equipment or the PPA when working with radioactive materials. Radioactive contamination may be also ingested as the result of eating contaminated plants and animals or drinking contaminated water or milk from exposed animals. Following a major contamination incidents, all potential pathways of internal exposure should be considered. So, like what I said, gain na radioactive contamination is possible enter to our body sa pamamagitan ng paglunok, paglanghap, pagsipsip o pagkanang injection. So dapat need yun magsuot og PPA o personal protective equipment para iwas na ma-adapt nato ang radioactive particles kay pwede nato makuha sa kontaminadong halaman o pwede pod ma-adapt nato sa atong alagang hayop og labi na karon sa hangin because of virus. So dapat first protection jud nato is mask. So dapat ang mask naa sa ilong og baba naka-cover dili sa suwang. So here's the periodic table with elements colored according to the half-life on their most stable isotope. So, ang color, sky blue ba ni? Sky blue is elements which contain at least one stable isotope. Then, ang mint green. Mint green radioactive elements, the most stable isotope is very long-lived with half-life of over 4 million years. Then, ang yellow is radioactive elements, the most stable isotope has half-life between 800 and 34,000 years. Orange is radioactive elements, the most stable isotope has half-life between 1 day and 130 years. Red is highly radioactive elements. The most stable isotope has half-life between several minutes and 1 day. And the violet is extremely radioactive elements. The most stable isotope has half-life less than several minutes. Very little known about these elements due to their extreme instability and radioactivity. Low-level contamination. The hazard to people and the environment from radioactive contamination depend on the nature of the radioactive contaminant, the level of contamination, and the extent of the spread of contamination. Low level of radioactive contamination pose little risk, but can still be detected by radiation instrumentation. If a survey or map is made of the contaminated area, random sampling location may be labeled with their activity in becquerels or curies on contact. Low levels may be reported in counts per minute using a scintillation counter. In the case of low-level contamination by isotopes with a short half-life, the best course of action may be to simply allow the material to naturally decay. Longer-lived isotopes should be cleaned up and properly disposed of because even a very low level of radiation can be life-threatening when in long exposure to it. So sample of low-level contamination is a food because food contamination refers to presence of harmful chemical and microorganisms in food which can cause consumer illness. The impact of the chemical contaminants on kanang contaminant on consumer health and well-being is often apparently only after many years of processing and prolonged exposure at low levels. High-level contamination. High level of contamination may pose major risk to people and the environment. People can be exposed to potentially lethal radiation levels, both externally and internally, from the spread of contamination of following an accident or a liberated initiation or kananggi oyo, involving large quantities of radioactive materials. The biological effect of extended exposure to radioactive contamination are generally the same as those from an external radiation source not involving radioactive materials, such as X-ray machine, and are independent on the absorption. Ang high level contamination is dili lang sa people daot apil na pod sa ato environment. Example sa kanang maka daot sa tao is kanang X-ray. Radiation sa X-ray, like para sa una nagpa-X-ray ko da sa maternity din nay buros gipasulod din gipagawas gyud siya sa doktor kay basig maigo daw siya sa radiation atong X-ray makuan daw ang bata. So ingana ka delikado ang radiation sa X-ray para sa mga buros.
Radiation hazard, mental health effects. So, what is a radiation? Radiation is the danger to the health and individual the arising from the exposure, the isosonizing radiation, whether draw the internal radiation on the radiation from the reductive substance within the body. So, what are the radiations? So, ang radiation is kanang kapekto yun siya sa atong health, sa atong lawas, ano yun siya. The hazard from the contamination is the emission of ionizing radiation. The principal radiation which will be the encounter are alpha, beta, and gamma, but these have quite different the characteristic. They have the widely the differing the penetrating powers and radiation effect, and the accompanying diagram show that the penetration of this. Radiation is a simple term for an understanding of the differences, the ionizing effects of this, the tradition, and the weighting the factors applied. See the article of assorted dose. Assorted flows. Tradition is a monitoring involves the measurement of radiation dose or the radionuclide, the contamination for the reason related to the assessment control of the exposure radiation and or radioactive substance and the interpretation of the result, the methodological and technical details of the design operation of the environment, environmental radiation monitoring programs and systems for the different the nuclei, the environmental, the media, and types of the facility are given the the safety, the standard, the series number of RSG1, and the EIEE safety, the referred series, the number of 64. So, nakalahi jud ang ka-epic ani no, ang uban is makapiklo jud sa lawas. Nakarin sa ato abong is naka-apekto yun sa atong lawas no. Like exposure to very high level of radiation such as being close to an atomic blast can cause the acute health effects such as skin burn and acute radiation. The syndrome, it can also result in the long-term health effects such as the cancer and the radiovascular disease. So, for example, the microwave. From a microwave oven, the ionizing radiation is a higher of the frequency of the EMR, the spectrum than the non-ionizing radiation. These the frequencies that runs from the visible light to gamma rays and X-ray. Background radiation. Para sa inyo, unsa ang background radiation? So, background radiation is a mixture of the level of ionizing radiation present in the environment of the particular location which is not draw the level rate the introduction of radiation source. Background the radiation the originate by from a variety of source, both natural the artificial. So, background radiation in the natural world, there is always radiation that emitted from the regional nuclide as the decay. Not only the entire world, the constantly the bombarded by the cosmic rays, but the vertically even every living thing on the earth contain carbon-14 and the tritium and most the including humans contain some potassium negative 40. This level the radioactivity pose a little danger but the confuse the measurement. A particular problem is the encounter with the natural the generated random gas with the can affect the instrument which are set to detect the contamination close to normal background levels and can cause false alarms because of the skills required by the operation the radiological the survey the equipment to the differentiate between background radiation and the radiation which emanates from the contamination. So ito mo ni siya ang mga sukatan sa mga inosin na makikita nang makita nato bitaw sa kapaligiran sa like ani siya nga kanang nga photo is kanay is makita nato diri ang kanang sagara ani sila is makita nato sa atong kanang makita nato bisan asa to especially aning pagkaon aning pagkaon bisan asa ta makita jud nato ni kanang medical kanang na makita nato ni sa hospital kanang nana dagha kani sila ang mga kuan mga source of background radiation is makita nato di bisan asa ta. Sample of background radiation is a living things. So, mo ni siya katong mga pagkaon. Living things, plants are the absorbed radioactive materials from the soil and this pass up the food chains. Mo na siya. Ug lain pa nga mga example is a rock and soil. So, rock and soil. Some rocks are the radioactive radon gas. So, mo na siya no. Cosmic rays, the radiation that reach the Earth from the space. So, muna siya ang mga examples sa radiation, background radiation. Effect of the contamination. So, para sa inyo, unsa ang effect of contamination? So, chemical can also get into the sediments, impacting the largest coastal areas, that threatening the human health, that reducing the economics well-being of the regions that depend on healthy coastal environment. So the word of the effect of the contamination is mo ni siya ang kanang mga chemical nga makaepekto sa atong lawas, sa atong kalusugan, sa atong health. Di ba kabantay mo anang like anang chemical kanang mga aso niya, di ba sa garan ano na to makita isa sa Manila biya kanang gabi nga aso niya, di ba? Daan na to nang sagaran daan nato makuan nga kana day nga mga aso is mao ni posibilidad nga makaapekto sa atong health, makaapekto sa atong lawas, chemical nga atong masimbuhot mga kan like dili sa ampayon di ba na makita nato da nga example da sa Shiba kanang magabuhat sila og kanang kuan plywood di ba kanang kadugayan diha kay kanang gabi na kaaso bitaw niya gabi na kaaso kadugay ng aso is mabaho na bitaw ana muna nga kanang tungod sa aso pinaagi ana nga aso is kanang kana bitaw makakuha ka diha og kanang sakit kanang mo na posibilidad nga kanang bitaw kanang dili ta mahimong healthy tungod kay sige ta ka makasimot og mga chemical. Biological effects. So the biological effects that generally defined as the response of an organism, a population or the community to change in its environment. So effects may also depend on the chemical, the toxicity of the deposited materials, the independent of the radioactivity, some the radionuclide, maybe the generally the distribute throughout the body and the rapidly the remove, as is the case with the treated water. Radioactive iodine 131 is a common diffusion product. It was a major component of the radiation release from the Chernobyl disaster, leading to 9 fatals, the cases of the Frederick, the thyroid cancer, the hypothyroidism. Biological effects as a hazard include the bacteria, viruses, the parasite, and the molds or the fungi. They can pose a threat to human health when they are inhaled, eaten, or come in the contact with skin. They can cause illness such as food poisoning, tinnitus, the respiratory, the infection, or the parasite infection. So, sa kanan jud is kanang sa biological effects is daa jud kanang usahay makakos siya og kanang daa makakuha og bacteria like sa panos ng pagkaon kanang daa makakuha bitang bacteria bitaw sa garan pod nga mo nang maapektuhan ang tao sa health tungod kay kanang masalamon nato nga mga bacteria ba mga hugaw o mo na ta magakos og mga illness. Other example is kanang isa water helping the kidney to flush waste and the toxin from the body. So ang tubig jud pod kanang pinagi pod sa tubig is kanang nakatabang siya sa ato ang lawas. Isa kanang ma-remove katong mo sa tong mako sa tong kidney. The vaginical is defined a blood relation. Sample of vaginical is a mother and her son to whom that she give birth. So same gapon din na siya no nga kanang like sa inahan bitaw nga kanang sa iyang pag-anak ba kanang magawas niya like ang mga inulan ina na ba magawas niya same naghapon na siya sa ato bitaw nga kanang need siya og kanang kon sa tong lawas with bitaw. Mental health effects. So sa gana to no isa common na gyud ang mental health effects jud no kung unsa ang mga epekto sa sa ato ang lawas no. The consequence of low-level dehydration are often more the physiological than radiological because damage from very low-level dehydration cannot be detected. People exposed to it are left in the angustied the uncertainty about what will happen to them. Many believes they have been fundamentally contaminated for life and may refuse to have children for fear or birth to defects. They may be shunned by others in their community who fear assured of the mysterious contagion. First, the equation from a relation or nuclear accident may lead to social isolation, anxiety, depression, physiometric medical problem, malicious behavior, even suicide. So dako jud kayo epekto ang mental health sa tong lawas no pag once na gyud ang mo-attack na gyud ang anxiety, depression, sagaran nanay uban nga mo commit na og suicide tungod sa ilang mental health. Grabe jud kayo ang mental health pag mo kana sa mo-attack sa ato tungod kay like sa anxiety kanang gabi bisan sa og tulog di makatulog depression kana labi na depress na labi nagpati na ang mental health kanang ma-depress na jud kana bitong muhilak na lang kagkalikta bisan na bitaw muna nga kanang sagaran jud no nga mo na sagaran mag-commit gusto lang suicide no. Such was the outcome of 1986 the Hermel Bay nuclear disaster in the Ukraine. A comprehensive 2005 study concluded the mental health the impact of the Chernobyl and the largest public health problem that unleashed by accident to death. Frank, as US scientists documented on the 2010 Fukushima nuclear disaster, seeing the fear of ionizing radiation could have a long-term physiological effects on a large portion of the population in the community area. Such great physiological danger does not accompany other materials that put people the risk of cancer and early the illness. Even the most resilient of us could be the concern, and many thousands of the radiation emergency survivors have subsequently gone on to develop the PTSD, depression, anxiety disorder as a result of their experience and the uncertainty surrounding their health. Sabi jud kayo no nga pag once na ang anxiety jud sa atong grabe jud maka-epekto sa atong lawas no. Una nga always dato nga ampingan jud nato atong lawas kay sabi na sa kuan kanang sa tuwa kanang kung unsa pud ato nga binuhaton maabot man gid ang panahon nga kanang ang consequences nato bitaw like sa mga babae kanang bitaw ang consequence nang dili dapat maligo magpagdug-on pero maligo jud may sagaran nga kanang maabot jud ang panahon bitaw nga ang consequence hatag gid sa ato agid bitaw mga balatian kana si pasmo inana ba kanang si pasmo mo kanjud ang atong consequences bitaw kay kabuki kanang inana like kanang anxiety tungod sa gabi kada kuan kanang magka-cause kag anxiety tungod ana that's all thank you and this is my report.